Good afternoon, everyone. I know post-lunch sessions are particularly tiring to keep alert. We will, between all of us, try and make this as engaging a session as possible. So please feel free to, engage in Q&A or discuss any thoughts that you might have. I'm Shilpa Reddy. I'm the Managing Director of Saptagir, Camphor and Saptagir Labs. I'm also the convener of the manufacturing panel of CII Indian Women's Network. As such, for the ladies here, if you are not already a part of CII IWN, please do join. There's a lot to learn from that perspective. So let's get rolling with today's session. Which is building manufacturing resilience. What have we all learned from COVID? What are the strategies that we have in place to tackle this, and not just this, but other disruptions as well? And I think so this is a shared experience between all of us. I think there's not one person who was not affected by the pandemic personally, professionally, or has not gone through the pain of it. So I think there's a lot that we would discuss between ourselves. Roll to the next slide, please. So just to describe a little bit about our company, we are, my flagship business is Saptagir Camphor. We've been in business for over 30 plus years. We are the largest manufacturers of camphor in India and the second largest globally. And the thing that I would like to highlight here is essentially we are about 750 crores odd in revenue. And we have two plants. One is in AP, one is in Telangana. The AP plant is an older plant. It has been established for quite a while, for 30 plus years. The Telangana plant, which is a diversification to pharma and API, and intermediates, is a newer plant. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because different challenges in both plants as a result of workforces being at different age levels, at different competencies, as well as geographical locations. We export to 50 plus countries, and 50%, more than 50% of our raw materials are imported. So we are particularly affected by global dynamics. And that's the thing to take away here at this point. I think that there is no other word for what is going on, right? It's a VUCA world. It's not just the pandemic. And the pandemic has hit us in ways that we could not ever have anticipated. But before that, there were disruptions on account of environmental regulations or changes that happened in China. There were huge disruptions in supply chain. After the pandemic, things that we did not anticipate, that there would be power disruptions or supply chain disruptions on account of power disruptions in China, which again hit us sort of in an unanticipated manner. There is discussions which Mr. Raju has touched upon on coal shortages and the escalating price of fuel as a result. Freight costs have skyrocketed. Again, factors that we would not have thought about, issues in supply chain or turnaround in the ports in the US, and the actions that various liners have taken as a result. And as a result, there's a lot of disruption in raw materials and supply chains again. So it's continuous scrambling. And I wouldn't say it's just for the last 2 years, although 2 years has been very intense. But even before that, things are changing more rapidly than we ever thought they would. So if I look at the 30-year span of the camphor business, for 20 years, it was relatively predictable. You knew your market, you knew your supply chain, you knew your customers, you knew your suppliers, you had built up decent relationships, and it was okay. The last 10 years, and particularly the last 5 years, things have changed very dramatically, and I think we've had to respond as a result. So how do we find structure? This is not going to get over. I mean, the pandemic has changed things, but there will be other challenges in macroeconomics that we have not anticipated yet. And that's basically what we are trying to, or we are constantly discussing about internally, and I'd like to share with you as well and solicit your views later. So moving on, how do we find structure in a VUCA word? So we broke this down, or internally we broke this down into kind of three separate sort of areas. One is we have to look at our business processes very, very keenly. What was previously given in terms of your PPC planning could no longer be dependent upon. And again, as Mr. Raju discussed, we took the similar action, which is we increased inventory levels substantially, both on the raw material side as well as the finished goods side, and we maintained slack. And of course, as everybody else did, we scrambled to develop alternate vendors, whether they were Chinese, whether they were Vietnamese, whether they were Brazilian, whether they were Indian, whatever it is. So whatever supply chains were, how do we kind of diversify enough so that we are, less impacted by the situation? So building Slack has become critical. As much as you would talk about, I think, digitization and so on, which is invaluable, building Slack became critical. And that's what we did. Slack comes at a cost. So from our perspective, cash was king. We sort of cut down everything that was we perceived as non-core at the time and focused on conserving cash and conserving a war chest that we could deploy in order to get priority supplies from suppliers. And ultimately, if there are 5 people bidding for the same product, the supplier gives it to the person who has the deepest pockets, the deepest relationships. And I think this is where you leverage that as much as you can. And the focus here was for us, given the nature of the product, and camphor is a product that is an antibacterial, antifungal, air purifier product. And it has been so perceived traditionally all across the world, particularly in India, particularly in Asia and such. And so it was, there was quite a bit of demand during COVID times, which was a really good thing from a business perspective. But what that meant is that inventory had to be kept in place. And we had to make sure there were no disruptions in supply to our customers, whether they were domestic or whether they were export. And that's where our attempt was. And so we focused quite a lot in terms of keeping it going in that perspective. From a technology perspective, I would say we learned hugely, as everybody else did, in terms of using the tools available to you, be it Zoom, be it Teams, be it whatever it is, to constantly keep in touch between the various departments, between factory and head office, between the factories, in terms of sharing best practices, in terms of what could be retooled, how quickly. And the learning in the API space was in fact different because we also engage in custom manufacturing, contract manufacturing for customers, and we were in fact doing critical projects at the time when COVID hit. And we actually managed to execute a project without the customer setting foot. And that was entirely because of the way the team picked up the tools. And we were able to actually do quite a bit of transfer in terms of technology, in terms of what had to be done. So I think it's a huge learning for all of us. When you need to, you definitely leverage, you take advantage of whatever is available to you, you learn as quickly as possible. And the same learnings have continued post-lockdown. And I think even post-COVID, we are seeing that we have adopted many of the technology tools that are available to us. And so that's something that's really a learning, I think, from our perspective. So in terms of business processes, a lot of retooling across the board, and every SOP that you had in place, every set process that you had in place, we went through and looked at it closely to see where we could realize efficiencies and, more importantly, continuity in terms of customer supplies. Employees, the other learnings were in how do we keep the ship going. And the key part of this was, of course, the team. And in a workforce where, in terms of the camphor unit, which is 30 plus years, it's a bit of an aging workforce. People have been there for a long time. And obviously, the fear in terms of COVID was much more there. And we went out and we created COVID bubbles. And I think, again, this is a practice that probably many people did. which is as much as possible, we housed our employees within closed proximity of the factory, where the access, incoming or outgoing access, was very much restricted and controlled. We built up quarantine spaces, which were on open land that was available near the factory. So any on-site vendors who came in could be housed there during quarantine processes, or employees who were going for various reasons were coming back and then being housed for various processes. And of course, very quick vaccination practices wherever we could, and whatever resources we could leverage to get employees and their families vaccinated as soon as possible, we organized that. So in terms of just moving quickly, these are the things that we had to do in order to, again, keep the continuity in the business. A big factor here is, of course, morale. Is, why should I come to work, right? Why would I risk my life and so on? I think at some point that discussion did happen, and look, we went on to say that these are the practices that we are implementing for your safety. If you need to take time off, you do. But in effect, we will also, take care of things in terms of the insurance and such. If there is an illness, you are covered, you are on a safer side. And so there were a lot of conversations around kind of keeping it going. And to their credit, I think the employees, most of them came back. And where they could not be, engaged in different practices, so that the same person could handle multiple reactors or multiple workspaces, and those were how we managed to deal with the situation. I do want to say that in our business, as we were fortunate that things had, there was sort of a positive correlation to COVID, we were able to acknowledge the efforts of our employees. We were able to provide a special bonus in addition to their normal bonus, particularly key personnel who found it exhausting to constantly deal with the management issues that happen in plants as a result of this, and sort of normal increment cycles that took place happened on par with what was happening. So I think both are important. Keeping your plant is a factor, of course, your processes, but more importantly, your people. And who really, I think, went through a lot to keep it going. And community engagement was another factor that we thought was very important. Of course, it's your humanitarian desire to kind of help people around you as much as possible. And we have been very engaged in CSR efforts over a long period of time. So we did do sanitizer and mask drives in all the local villages around. We interacted with frontline workers, which were local hospitals, which were, police officials and so on and so forth, to kind of help them give the sanitizers. The fortunate thing that happened is, because we had the pharma plant and we had some, availability and capacity, we actually went out and made our own sanitizer, which we were able to then distribute in bulk to various entities. And so that was a helpful thing in terms of goodwill building. And this is very critical because the local villages can, in fact, stop traffic of vehicles, can stop traffic of people if they don't feel, if you're not on good terms. So I think it was very critical, both in terms of humanitarian efforts, but as an industry, to keep continuity, that we would engage, and we did. And again, to their credit, local villages were very helpful and were very supportive, I think, and understood that things had to keep going in order for employment to continue, as far as, and putting kind of bread on the table type of situations. So these are sort of the ways we addressed the various stakeholders to help with the dealing with the situation. Now, the opportunities. Mr. Raju spoke about that as well. Now, in terms of what went on as a result of all these efforts, and I think between the management, between the employees, between our stakeholders, the plant was 100% functional during COVID with the appropriate permissions from government. So that was actually one very good thing. We executed 100% of our orders. There was no slack as far as the order book was concerned at all. We did not lose a single customer. And what happened is, we actually gained as a result, partly on account of two things. One is the competitors could not, for locational reasons, continue to supply. At that time, we were able to step in and take customers, take market share in areas that we would not have been able to enter because geographically they were serving a particular area. So that became a huge thing. We were able to penetrate certain markets that we could not previously. The other thing is in terms of our export customers. Yet again, I think there were huge discussions as far as multinationals are concerned in terms of developing a China alternative that has been often spoken. So we are still, I would say India is still not number one in terms of supply chains, but again, the discussions happened in various boardrooms about how do they develop China alternatives. And we benefited from that. So we were able to break into markets that again, we could not. There were opportunities that came up in the US where the Chinese competitors had been entrenched for 20 plus years in terms of just in inventory and so on. We were able to take that. So it's not where it's all bad. I think it's been a tough ride the last 2 years. No question about that. The opportunities it has thrown up are also substantial. And I think we kind of need to keep looking at how to leverage these opportunities as and when they crop up, and they crop up unexpectedly, and gives us learnings from that perspective. In terms of what could be done on the policy front here, I think that some of this has been done already. This is not new, but I do think given the coal issues at hand, a more focused approach on renewable energy. But even within our own plants, for example, our plant is fueled by groundnut husk as well as coal. It's a multi-fuel boiler, so that helped a great deal. There was, in fact, no effect in terms of coal shortage issues in one of the plants. In the other one, we were. The PLI scheme implementation on an expedited basis would be much appreciated as far as pharma industry is concerned. We have already put in an application, but I think it would benefit hugely in terms of developing an Indian vendor database, which is in fact still missing and substantially missing. There is still a huge dependence on China, despite all the discussions that have happened, and it is critical and key that we do that. And part of that same initiative is again expedited clearances on red zone in chemical industries. In terms of establishing chemical parks so that we are able to, not deal with the day-to-day issues in terms of pollution control and so on and so forth, and those are taken care of. So we do need to build up and scale up rapidly, and that's some of the thoughts that I have in terms of how to go forward with it. So these are the key thoughts that I have in terms of how we dealt with COVID. Look forward to hearing our panelists' discussions further on it, and look forward to hearing from you on how you deal with COVID in your businesses and how we can learn. Thank you very much.